All right, welcome everybody. This podcast is different from our normal episode. Prior to the launch of our first episode, our family lost its patriarch in the early morning of July 10th, 2023. Roger Williams McDaniel, the father of Wendy and Ryan, also known as Fluffy and the CEO, passed away. This tribute episode is dedicated to our beloved father. We will be discussing his life, family, and company. Are you ready to talk about Pop? So, welcome, guys. Just want to recognize that for all the episodes that we've recorded up to now, we've had both Mom and Dad here to watch you guys. So today we've got Ryan's wife, Catherine. We've got Mom, but we're missing Roger, also known as Dad and Pop. So, again, Ryan, why did you call your dad Pop?
Well, thanks for that introduction. A little bit emotional tribute here, but that's a great question. I don't have an answer other than the true answer, which was this. I would kind of mix it up, Dad, Pop, and Roger told me one time he liked that being referred to as Pop. So he only had to say it once, and from that point forward, I referred to him as Pop. I think I got it because once in a while he would, in third party, talk about his father, would talk about his father, but he called him Pop. So I think my dad enjoyed, or it created a little bit of a memory in his mind when I said Pop.
Wendy, what made your dad so respected and beloved by those that were blessed to know him?
Oh, Dad was beloved and respected by so many people. You know, Dad had a servant's heart. He always put other people before him, always. And just a little story to illustrate that. When Dad was called home, I went to Dunkin' Oil and talked to some of the team. And I met with Jessica, who was the first female dispatcher that Dad hired at Dunkin'. And she shared a beautiful moment with me. She said that when she started working there, Dad would always ask her, how are the drivers treating you? Is everything good? Because I guess she was working night shift and Dad was worried about her safety. And she did say, well, you know, when I leave, it's kind of dark out. So, you know, if you could put a light there, that would be great. And she said a light was there the very next day she worked. And that's my dad. She also said that he would always check on her almost every day. Just pop his head in. How you doing? Everything okay? You know, and I thought of a doctor making his rounds. You know, Dad making his rounds, checking on his people. But my father was so incredibly kind, generous to a fault, humble, honest. And when I talked to the team at Dunkin', one thing that all the employees said was that he had such a calming presence. He just made situations and people feel at peace. Dad was brilliant. He had a brilliant intellect, a wicked sense of humor, and he just, when you met Dad, you walked away wanting to be a better person because of the person he was. And he brought out the best in everyone.
Awesome. Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about where your dad grew up?
Yeah, he grew up in a small town of Richwood, Ohio, which is mostly an agricultural town. My grandfather had a house, I believe, on Talview or Towledge Drive. So, small town America, just like you would envision a small town America.
Wendy, tell us about your dad's love of animals, and specifically, there's something about a snowball. Can you kind of tell us about that?
Yeah, look at this trophy. Like Ryan said, Dad was raised on a family farm in Richwood, Ohio, and he always showed animals at the county fair. And when he was in high school, he won the 4-H trophy for the Grand Champion steer. And it was a black Angus steer named Snowball. Black. It's named Snowball. Okay? So that shows you Dad's sense of humor, It's a black steer named Snowball. But he was incredibly proud of that award. He talked about it often. And he was very attached to Snowball. I mean, he said he was happy that he won the trophy and he, earned money for a scholarship for his college. But he said he shed tears because he was so attached to Snowball.
So was Snowball his only animal in his life, or did he have other animals?
We had, growing up, Dad loved dogs. So we had Schnauzers, Max, Dixie, and Angel Bell. And both Mom and Dad loved our dogs. So we always had dogs. And I think definitely both Mom and Dad love animals, but we definitely get that love of animals, Ryan and I, from Dad, because he loved all animals.
So Ryan, did he have a few animals at work as well?
Oh, yeah, he had Maisie June. I'm going to ducktail back to that Snowball. The one thing that my sister left out, which I think is the most important part of that story because it speaks to my dad's heart, it also speaks to the time that they were in. So he slept in the pen with Snowball before Snowball went to hamburger heaven, and my dad was crying, and my grandpa, I remember Roger telling me this story. Grandpa looked at him and said, "Why are you crying?" And he goes, "That just paid for your college education." So I always found that interesting because it exemplified even my father as a senior in high school, his heart and his soul and his spirit to an animal superseded the economics that was needed for him to go to college.
Ryan, what was your dad most proud of in his youth? Apparently he's pretty much renowned in that area.
Yeah, it'd be basketball. I mean, he loved basketball. He got inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame at his high school. Him and his best friend of 70 years, Jim Christie, I believe they were both the point guards. I believe Mr. Don Wasserbeck, was a power forward. And those were fond memories of my father because he would share them with me.
Wendy, can you tell us how your mom and dad met? I see that we have a picture of them at their wedding on the table, but how did they meet?
They met on a blind date in Cleveland, Ohio, where Mom lived, and that's where Dad was working as a salesman. And a friend set them up, and they decided that they were going to a late movie. So if they both thought each other was too ugly, then they wouldn't have to waste much time. But Mom said she was smitten immediately when she saw him. And Dad has said many times, your mom was hot. So he thought he was smitten with Mom too. And 10 days later, Dad popped the question. They were engaged. And he was very proud. I guess he had a red Triumph sports car at the time. And he had to sell that for Mom's engagement ring.
Wow.
And Mom's mom, said when Mom got home, Grandma said to her, "You're going to marry him."
And Grandma was right.
Grandma was right.
The consummate salesman, he locked her down quick, didn't he? That's awesome.
Yes.
Ryan, can you tell us about the earliest memory you have of your dad?
It's a deep question. It's probably I can't answer that too quick because I would have to really think on it. I don't have one memory that really jumps out other than just a bunch of them.
What's something that you fondly did together as a kid?
The wrestling tournaments, that was probably the best memory. Us traveling in the summer, going to this school, going to that was great times. And then obviously working together.
There was something about a race car. Didn't you get a race car when you were a kid?
Oh, I had a little go-kart, yeah, that he gifted me from Pennzoil, and I would ride around the corporate office. That was a time where we had bulk plants, and the trucks would actually load to get diesel fuel or heating oil. So it's hard to envision, but if you know where our corporate office is on Factory Road, at one time, you have to think of like a figure 8. The trucks would go up on the hill, they would load, and like an 8, they would come out and hit the road. And I would loop that figure 8 on my golf cart and have the drivers keep honking at me and get out of the way.
Yeah, he rode that a lot. He rode that a lot. He loved that.
Wendy, can you tell us what your dad's philosophy was regarding disciplining his children?
He didn't. It would drive Mom crazy. Aren't you going to yell at them for doing that? Aren't you going to ground them? No. Yeah, Dad didn't discipline us. He was too much as a softie.
Ryan, do you have the same remembrance?
Yeah, that was something he struggled with.
Can I tell the story of running into Ryan's car?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So I was at Ohio State, and I was going back to school after the weekend, and I was pulling out of the garage, and Ryan's car was right in the driveway. And if you know me, you know I'm not the best driver. So Dad was at the end of the driveway, and he just rightly assumed that I knew Ryan's car was there. So I literally backed into Ryan's car. And Mom said Dad just flew off the ground. He just couldn't believe he was there and saw me back into Ryan's car. But you know, that is another story that shows he had every right to be furious with me, but he didn't want me to be upset because I was driving back to Ohio State. And he just said, you know, honey, we'll, you know, drive safely. Don't worry. You know, we'll get it fixed. And as a parent, I just marvel at that patience and love that he showed.
Ryan, how'd you feel about your sister backing into your new car?
I don't really remember that one. My memory's not as good going back to that, but I can see my dad definitely being calm, for sure.
So, Ryan, your dad was an early adopter of technology. So I recall when you were young, he had this massive camcorder. What did he use that for? And
that was for the wrestling tournaments, yeah. He definitely had the, if we all remember, the shoulder strap, like a boombox radio. It was just a camcorder, but he was ahead of the time back then.
So he was doing videos even before you were.
He was.
Wendy, can you tell us how your dad would make you feel if you had a problem?
Make me feel, and everyone who had a problem that came to Dad for wise counsel. You could come to Dad with just the world on your shoulders. Just think that everything's just coming in at you. In 5 minutes with Dad, you walked away from him going, everything's going to be okay. I've been saying one of his gifts and talents was he soothed souls. I mean, he did. Dad was so wise, and yeah, in 5 minutes he'd make you feel that everything's going to be okay.
Ryan, can you tell us about your mom and dad and their relationship?
Sure. I think very committed to each other. 58, almost 59 years signifies that. In my opinion, they had a good understanding of each other's strengths. My mom was an awesome mom/housewife, raised me and my sister. House was always clean, always had food, all that stuff made me feel secure. And my dad went to work and built a business. So I feel they complemented each other. In the very beginning, they had to play together because the business was small and it required them to work together so they could grow it. But after 5 years and it started getting some momentum, my mom was able to shift to what she wanted to do, and Roger continued to do what he wanted to do.
Wendy, tell us about your dad's, the most romantic thing that your dad ever did for your mom.
Very easy. It's the most romantic thing I've ever seen a husband do for a wife. Mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And after surgery, she was in the hospital. And Dad came in with a pink teddy bear. And he said, honey, we have cancer.
That says a lot about him, doesn't it? He would take on everybody else's problem and make them better.
Yes, and Mom will say also that was pretty romantic. And that simple sentence just said that I'm not going anywhere, and we're in this together. And they've had many battles, many struggles during their 57 years of marriage, but that simple sentence just so eloquently conveyed that they were in this together.
Wendy, tell us about your dad's schooling background.
Well, Dad went to Ohio University first, and he had a job bussing tables at the dining halls, and he also worked in a sorority. And Dad didn't date much in college, and he jokes that he saw the sorority girls in the morning, so he wasn't that impressed. But he said it was really hard to find work at OU. And so that's why he had to transfer to Ohio State. And Ohio State is where he earned his business degree.
So Ryan, tell our audience about Duncan Oil Company.
Sure. Duncan Oil Company was started by a gentleman by the name of Vince Duncan. Roger, upon graduating from Ohio State, got a job with Gulf Oil initially, and then he had transitioned to working for Pennzoil. And in the time of working with Pennzoil, there's a competitor of ours that's actually now since sold about 3 years ago in Cincinnati that was a customer of his, and he had mentioned, hey, there's this little oil company in Beaver Creek that might be for sale. So he purchased that in 1978.
And so lots transpired since 1978.
A lot has transpired. The first year, my mother and obviously my sister and I remained in Medina, Ohio. He went in a pickup truck and lived in the Econo Lodge off 35 and drove a truck and started to learn the business.
So tell us what the business is like now.
That's a big question to be able to answer in 30, 60 seconds. But in essence, think of a sailboat race. That's what I want the viewers to hear. Roger set out on a course, and like anything, we've kind of went left, we went right, but we've continued to go forward. So throughout the years, he got into the construction business. We had a restaurant. We had even at one time, he had some bugs that he had purchased that were supposed to eat a oil spill. All those things we've tried to where we are now, where we're pretty rigid on. We have 10 different business units, from our road dog division to our trucks to propane to heating oil to an environmental division to a petroleum tank testing division. So Roger really got to see in the last 10 years, in my opinion, a lot of the streams we were jumping in, because especially entrepreneurs know this, you're always trying to grow your business. And sometimes the space that you operate in could be shrinking or could be changing. And the last 10 years, I think Roger and I kind of felt we had found our niche somewhat.
So when did you start working with your dad?
I've worked with him since I was basically 9 years old. So I've worked in the stores when I was 16, or basically from 15 to 17, I worked in this little C-store he had in Lynchburg, Ohio. And sometimes that brings back a lot of good memories for me because it was about an hour and a half drive. And, it's a very small town, so I would drive out there. Coming from kind of the city, it was a pretty good experience.
What did Duncan Oil mean to your father?
I'll let Wendy answer it how she sees it, but in my opinion, it was him. So to ask, a little emotional still talking about it, but nobody has this unless you build a business. I'm sorry, it's a fact. The business requires your spirit, your soul, your mind. It just doesn't magically grow. So what Duncan Oil meant to my dad was who he was. That organization represented what he stood for, what he believed in, and what he was trying to achieve in his life. So simply put, it says it's Dunkin' Oil Company, but always in my mind, it's my dad.
Wendy, what do you think your dad's final wishes were for Dunkin' Oil Company? What do you think made him happiest at the end of his life?
That his son would take it over. That Ryan would continue to grow the company and the torch would be passed to him. That was his ultimate dream. And it's so wonderful that, Ryan and Roger had those years. Once the torch was officially passed, that Dad saw the company grow, and he saw the changes that Ryan made, and all those changes were wonderful, and he really delighted in that. And you're going to see the footage of the convoy for Dad's funeral
Procession.
We had Ryan and his team organized a procession of our trucks, 47 Dunkin' Oil tankers, transports from all the divisions, and they left from HQ1 and drove to Richwood, Ohio. And Ryan was in the first transport. And when we arrived, he got out of that transport, and I told Ryan it was the proudest moment I've ever had, because there was no doubt when he got out of that transport that the torch has been passed, and he is now the leader of our father's company. And my dad and Ryan has said, Dad will always be felt there, and he's always the founder, but that was his ultimate dream for Ryan to lead Dunkin' Oil.
That's pretty special. So, Wendy, tell us how your dad liked being a grandfather.
Our daughter is 23, and it's a funny story. With the day she was born in Pensacola, Florida, at the hospital, my mother was flying in, but Dad someone had to run the company, so he stayed behind. And I got a call in the hospital, and he called and said, "Honey, everyone's asking me at Dunkin' why I'm here. They say I should be in Florida to meet my first grandchild." And I said, "Well, Dad, I know you're going to see her soon, but if you want to get on a plane, she'd love to see you." So he did, and he brought a little rattle, but I still chuckle at that he is like, had his team had to tell him, "Roger, you should be in Florida." But that's another story that just shows how devoted my dad was to his company. And as his daughter, I understood that, and it's even more poignant now.
Ryan, so Wendy mentioned kind of the tribute that Dunkin' paid your father on his send-off. Can you tell us a little bit about how the company rallied to make that happen?
Man, that's a tearjerker, because first of all, I have the best humans in the world that work at Dunkin' Oil Company, and we've been working on this thing for about a decade called culture. Treating a human being as a human being, holding people accountable professionally, mentoring them, not so much using the whip as opposed to a little bit of honey. And so the individual who's the most important to me in my life, I did not have to give one thought to. I told the team, and they ran with it. I mean, they just hit it out of the park. I can't just say one person, because it wasn't one person. It was truly a team effort. My father's passion was his core values. It was something that he sat in an office with, and he took a pen out and he wrote down. And those core values are this. And I want everybody to hear this, and they're sequenced for a reason. Because my team executed all these. The first one is teamwork. Together, everyone accomplishes more. The second one is integrity. Do the right thing all the time. The third one is always improve. Get better at what we do. So those first three are sequence, which is if my sister and I are working together and her and I are doing the right thing, whatever it is in life, we're going to improve. And if we're improving, that fourth core value is going to happen, which is growth. We're going to grow. And if we're growing, the fifth one happens, profit. But why I wanted people to hear that and why that's magical that my dad put that together was most people, unfortunately, put profit first. Profit is a byproduct of human beings working together and getting along. And that was my dad at his core. Did that make any sense?
Oh, it did. What, as terms of an entrepreneur, what would your dad want to pass along to our
great
viewers?
question. There's a lot of different types of entrepreneurs. You know, you have entrepreneurs that are technology, app, code driven. My father being born in 1941, obviously the internet didn't really hit until 2000. So to answer your question on what was he like as an entrepreneur, great risk taker, which prevents 98% of most people. He would roll the dice. And what I mean by roll the dice, it didn't matter what he had acquired. He would still roll the dice. If the opportunity got his juices flowing, he didn't hedge a bet. Why is that important? Because you're not going to get anywhere in life if you don't take a risk. The other thing he did, and to discuss about who or what is irrelevant, but this is the message, because your question was, how was he as an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur also has to have the skin to know that they're going to have risk, and they're going to take some shots. Nothing in life goes vertical forever. So my dad had a couple financial hiccups that were pretty intense. That would have required most people to pack up their tent. That was not in his DNA. He was the type of guy that would go down with the ship. That's what made him a good entrepreneur. Your team has to believe in you. And there was no doubt under his leadership that we're not going to do anything for just a money play. Every decision we make is going to be for the betterment of our 300 plus families that eat from Dunkin' Oil and our customers. So those two things as an entrepreneur stand out me to the most. Risk taker, and when times got tough, he didn't seek an exit ramp. He had that patience and that wisdom to weather the storm.
He would always say, opportunity is everywhere.
Wendy, what is something that would make your dad smile?
His family, mom, us,
Ice cream.
yeah, his people at Dunkin'. But he loved ice cream. He had a bowl, Mom said, every night. And Dad was always moving like Ryan, so all that energy really kept, into his 80s, he could eat ice cream every night because he worked that off with his boundless energy. Not many people can do that. He loved cheeseburgers and meat. Ryan's wife always made him deviled eggs for Christmas because that was one of his favorite thing. He loved eggs in any form, but he loved deviled eggs, bologna. He loved, Dad had 2 vacation homes, one on Fripp Island, South Carolina, and then Lake Erie. And Dad loved water. He loved looking at the water. He loved boating. He loved fishing. He loved the water. So that made him smile too.
Ryan, anything that made him smile that you can think of?
Good deal at work. Getting a new customer. Growing the business.
Awesome. All right. Thank you both for sharing your hearts with us today. I know your dad is proud of both of you and is smiling right now. On behalf of Fluffy and the CEO, I will leave you with the words of Roger's childhood friend of 70 years, the Reverend Jim Christie. Roger, goodbye. We miss you. We love you. We'll see you later. God be with us until we meet again.